The silence in Chandler Ford's study was absolute, broken only by the soft tick of an antique clock and the distant rumble of thunder. He sat behind his mahogany desk, shoulders rigid with exhaustion, staring at the resignation letter that had arrived that morning. The 19th nanny in 18 months. I'm sorry, Mr. Ford, but Luna's condition is beyond my expertise. I recommend seeking more specialized care. Specialized care, as if his 7-year-old daughter was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be loved. Lightning illuminated the tall windows, casting stark shadows across family portraits that felt more like mockeries now. Rebecca smiled from every frame. Beautiful, vibrant Rebecca, who died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving behind a grieving husband and a little girl whose world had shattered into incomprehensible pieces. Luna's bipolar disorder had manifested 6 months after her mother's death. The manic episodes were devastating. Furniture overturned, walls painted with whatever she could find, hours of screaming that seemed to tear something vital from Chandler's chest each time. The depressive episodes were worse. Days when Luna wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, would simply stare at nothing with eyes too old and hollow for a child. Chandler pressed his fingers against his temples, feeling the familiar throb of another headache. Tomorrow he'd have to call the agency again, start the exhausting process of interviews and background checks and hope. Always hope, despite the growing certainty that no one could help his daughter. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Ford? His assistant's voice was carefully neutral. There's a woman here about the nanny position. She doesn't have an appointment, but send her away, Janet. We're done for today. Sir, I think you should see her. She's persistent. Chandler almost smiled at that. Persistent was usually the first quality to crumble when faced with Luna's reality. 5 minutes. When the study door opened, Chandler looked up expecting another fresh-faced college graduate with child psychology textbooks and good intentions. Instead, he found himself staring at a woman who looked like she'd been forged by fire and hadn't quite cooled. Charisse Howard was beautiful, but not in the soft, approachable way of the previous nannies. Her beauty was sharp-edged, intelligent, with olive skin that spoke of Mediterranean heritage and natural curls styled with precision. She wore a simple black dress that fit her slim frame perfectly, and when their eyes met, Chandler felt something unexpected, recognition, as if he was looking at another survivor of some unnamed war. Mr. Ford. Her voice was low, confident, with the faintest trace of a southern accent. I'm here about your daughter. The position has specific requirements, which I've read. She moved into the room without invitation, her gaze taking in the family photos, the scattered resignation letters on his desk, the half-empty glass of bourbon he thought he'd hidden. How many nannies have quit this month? Chandler's jaw tightened. That's not relevant to 3. Charisse settled into the chair across from his desk as if she belonged there. I counted the resignation letters, all citing the same reasons: behavioral challenges beyond normal scope, and recommend intensive psychiatric intervention. Her dark eyes fixed on his. Tell me about Luna. Something in her tone made him pause. Not the clinical curiosity of a professional, but something deeper, personal. She has bipolar disorder, he said finally. Early onset, the episodes are severe. How severe? Chandler studied her face, searching for the moment when understanding would dawn and she'd make her excuses. Last week, she barricaded herself in her room and painted the walls with her own blood. The week before that, she threw every piece of furniture she could lift down the main staircase. She hasn't slept through the night in 4 months. Charisse didn't flinch. What triggers the episodes? Everything. Nothing. Loud noises, unexpected schedule changes, the wrong color plate at breakfast. His voice cracked slightly. Sometimes I think it's just the fact that I'm her father and I couldn't protect her mother. And what do you do during the episodes? Chandler looked away. Try to keep her safe. Try to keep her from hurting herself or destroying everything around her. Fail mostly. Do you hold her? The question was so unexpected that Chandler actually startled. What? During the episodes, do you hold her? She won't let me near her. She screams if I try to touch her, like I'm causing her pain. Charisse leaned forward slightly. Mr. Ford, when was the last time you cried? I'm sorry? Grief is contagious. Children absorb it, especially sensitive children. Luna isn't just dealing with her mother's death and her own neurological condition. She's trying to manage your pain, too. Chandler felt something cold settle in his chest. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying trauma compounds. Luna lost her mother, but she also lost the father she knew. You're both drowning, just in different ways. For a moment, the only sound was rain against the windows. Then Chandler spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What would you do differently? I'd start by accepting that Luna isn't broken. She's a 7-year-old girl whose brain works differently and whose heart is shattered. You can't fix either of those things, but you can learn to work with them instead of against them. And you think you can help her? Charisse was quiet for a long moment, her expression growing distant. I think I understand what it feels like to have everyone around you convinced you're too much to handle. Something in her tone made Chandler look at her more carefully. You have experience with bipolar disorder? I have experience with being told I was impossible to love. The rawness in her voice hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't professional detachment. This was personal truth shared like a gift or a weapon. Why do you want this job? He asked. Charisse met his eyes directly. Because every child deserves at least one adult who isn't afraid of their darkness. Chandler hired her that night, though he told himself it was desperation rather than the strange pull he'd felt during their conversation. The next morning, he watched from his office window as Charisse approached the front steps, her posture confident but her hands betraying a slight tremor. Luna had been having a quiet day, the hollow, listless kind that followed major episodes. She sat in the living room in her pajamas, staring at a cartoon on the television without really seeing it. When Chandler introduced Charisse, Luna's response was typically blunt. You're prettier than the last one, but you'll leave too. They always leave. Charisse crouched down to Luna's eye level, her movement slow and deliberate. You're right, I am pretty, and you're right that people leave, but I'm not planning to. That's what they all say. Did they say it like they meant it, or like they were trying to convince themselves? Luna considered this with the seriousness of a child forced to become too wise too young. Like they were trying to convince themselves. I'm not trying to convince myself of anything. I'm here because I want to be here. With you. Even if you have scary days. I have a lot of scary days. I know, your dad told me, I have scary days too sometimes. Luna's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of scary days? Days when my brain tells me I'm not worth loving. Days when I feel too angry or too sad or too much of everything all at once. Chandler, watching from the doorway, felt his chest tighten. He'd hired dozens of professionals who spoke about Luna's condition with clinical detachment. None of them had ever admitted to their own struggles. Do you take medicine for your scary days? Luna asked. Sometimes, and I talk to people who understand. And I try to remember that scary days don't last forever, even when they feel like they will. Luna was quiet for a moment. Then, can we watch cartoons together? I'd like that very much. As they settled on the couch, Chandler found himself studying Charisse's profile. There was something magnetic about her presence, not just her physical beauty, but the way she seemed completely unguarded with Luna, while maintaining an invisible wall around herself. She laughed at the cartoon, asked Luna questions about the characters, and somehow made the massive living room feel intimate and safe. After lunch, Luna retreated to her room for what Chandler knew would be hours of brooding solitude. He found Charisse in the kitchen, making notes in a small journal. Observation or battle plans? He asked. She glanced up, and for a moment her professional composure slipped. Both, I suppose. She's incredibly intelligent. Too intelligent sometimes. She understands things a 7-year-old shouldn't have to understand. Intelligence isn't the enemy. It's just another tool she'll need to learn to use. Charisse closed the journal. Can I ask you something? Of course. When Luna has an episode, what do you feel? Chandler poured himself coffee, using the mundane task to buy time. Helpless. Terrified. Like I'm failing her in the exact same way I failed Rebecca. How did you fail Rebecca? The question was asked gently, but it still felt like a blade between his ribs. I should have been driving that night, should have insisted. If I'd been in that car instead of her. Luna would have lost both parents instead of one. She might have been better off. Charisse set down her pen and looked at him directly. Do you really believe that? Chandler met her gaze and saw something there he hadn't expected. Not judgment or pity, but understanding. Some days. What about the other days? The other days I think maybe I can learn to be enough. Something shifted in Charisse's expression, a softening around her eyes that made Chandler's pulse quicken. Maybe we both can. Over the following weeks, Chandler found himself looking forward to coming home in a way he hadn't since Rebecca's death. The house felt different with Charisse in it, not just calmer, but more alive. She had a way of drawing out the best in everyone around her, from Luna to Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper who'd been growing increasingly worried about the family's emotional state. Charisse's approach to Luna's care was unlike anything the previous nannies had attempted. Instead of trying to prevent or redirect Luna's episodes, she created safe spaces for them to unfold. She moved breakable objects out of Luna's room, installed soft padding on the walls, and filled a large trunk with items Luna could safely throw or tear when the manic energy demanded physical expression. More importantly, she stayed. During the episodes, while previous nannies had either fled or called for Chandler to handle the situation, Charisse would sit outside Luna's door, speaking in low, steady tones, not trying to calm or control, but simply maintaining a consistent presence. "Why don't you go in?" Chandler asked one evening, finding her in her usual position in the hallway while Luna raged behind the closed door. "Because she needs to know she has control over her own space," Charisse replied without looking up from her book. Going in uninvited teaches her that adults will always overpower her when she's vulnerable. But she's destroying her room. She's managing her pain with the tools she has. Tomorrow we'll clean up together and talk about what happened. Tonight she just needs to know I'm not going anywhere. As if summoned by their conversation, the sounds from Luna's room gradually quieted. A few minutes later, the door opened and Luna emerged, exhausted and tear-streaked, but no longer in the grip of mania. "Miss Charisse," she said in a small voice. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I made a mess." "I know. We'll take care of it tomorrow. Right now, do you want to sit with me?" Luna nodded and curled up against Charisse's side. Within minutes, she was asleep. Chandler watched the scene with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something that made his chest feel tight and warm simultaneously. When Luna was safely tucked into his arms to be carried to bed, he found Charisse still sitting in the hallway. "You didn't have to stay," he said quietly. "Yes, I did. The other nannies aren't me." She stood, brushing off her jeans. Luna needs to know that when she's at her worst, the people who matter don't disappear. "Is that what happened to you?" The question escaped before Chandler could stop it. Too personal and direct. Charisse paused, her hand on the banister. For a moment, he thought she might actually answer. Then her professional mask slid back into place. "Good night, Mr. Ford." But as she climbed the stairs to her room, Chandler caught something in her expression, a flicker of vulnerability that made him realize Charisse Howard might be just as carefully guarded as his daughter. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, during what started as an ordinary Thursday morning. Luna was having breakfast, chattering about a dream she'd had involving flying horses and ice cream clouds, when she suddenly went quiet. "Miss Charisse," she said carefully, "do you have a little girl like me?" Charisse's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. Chandler, reading the newspaper at the head of the table, felt his attention sharpen. "No, sweetheart, I don't have any children." "Did you ever want them?" "Luna," Chandler began, sensing dangerous territory, but Charisse held up a gentle hand. "I did want them once," she said quietly. "Very much. What happened?" Charisse was silent for so long that Chandler thought she might not answer. Then, sometimes wanting something isn't enough. Luna, with the intuitive wisdom of a child who'd experienced loss, seemed to understand that some doors shouldn't be pushed open. She simply reached over and patted Charisse's hand. "I'm glad you came to take care of me instead." Charisse's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Me too, baby, me too." Later that evening, after Luna was asleep, Chandler found Charisse on the back terrace, a glass of wine in her hands and her eyes fixed on the distant lights of the city. "Mind if I join you?" She gestured to the chair beside her without looking away from the view. For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the day settling around them like a familiar blanket. "You don't have to talk about it," Chandler said finally, "but if you want to, I'm here." Charisse took a sip of wine, her expression thoughtful. "I was married once." "David, we tried for years to have a baby." Her voice was steady, but Chandler could hear the old pain underneath. 3 miscarriages, the last one nearly killed me." "I'm sorry, David couldn't handle it." "The grief, the medical complications, the way I changed. He said I became someone he didn't recognize. Too angry, too sad, too much work." She finally turned to look at Chandler. He wasn't entirely wrong. Grief changes people. "Does it?" Or does it just reveal who we really are when everything else is stripped away? Chandler considered this, thinking of his own transformation after Rebecca's death. Maybe both. David wanted the woman I was before, optimistic, accommodating, easy. But that woman was built on the assumption that good things happen to good people, and that if you just tried hard enough, you could control the important outcomes. Charisse's laugh held no humor. Losing 3 babies taught me how little control we actually have. Is that when you started working with children? Not immediately. First, I had what my therapist generously called a period of adjustment. I quit my job, moved back in with my mother, spent 6 months convinced I was toxic to everything I touched. She paused. Then I met a little girl named Jasmine at a community center. She had PTSD from witnessing her father's murder. Everyone said she was difficult, that she needed more help than volunteers could provide. But you saw something different. I saw a child who'd learned that the world was dangerous and unpredictable, and who was responding accordingly. Just like I was. Charisse's expression grew distant. I started volunteering there, discovered I had a talent for connecting with kids everyone else had given up on. Kids like Luna. She met his eyes. Kids like I was. Chandler felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition so profound it was almost painful. You weren't just another difficult case, were you? Charisse's smile was soft and sad. Foster care 11 homes between the ages of 6 and 18. I was intense. Emotional, asked too many questions, felt everything too deeply. Most families found me exhausting. Most families were idiots. The vehemence in his voice seemed to surprise them both. Charisse studied his face, and Chandler saw the moment when her carefully maintained distance wavered. Why do you care? She asked quietly. Because... Chandler stopped, the honest answer catching in his throat. Because when you talk, I feel less alone than I have in 2 years. Because you see Luna not as a problem to solve, but as a person to love. Because when you smile at something she's done, I feel proud in a way that has nothing to do with my own accomplishments. Because I think I'm falling in love with you. Because Luna's not the only one who deserves someone who isn't afraid of her darkness, he said instead. Charisse's breath caught, and for a moment the space between them felt electric with possibility. Then she looked away, and Chandler knew he'd pushed too far too fast. I should check on Luna, she said, rising from her chair. Charisse, good night, Chandler. She was gone before he could find words to call her back, leaving him alone with the night air and the growing certainty that what he felt for her was far more dangerous than simple attraction. The storm that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday in October. Not the metaphorical kind, but an actual tempest that knocked out power lines and sent tree branches crashing into windows. Luna, whose episodes were often triggered by atmospheric changes, had been agitated all day. By evening, the house was running on generators and Luna was in full manic swing. She'd already rearranged all the furniture in her room twice and was now pacing the hallway with manic energy, talking rapidly about building a rocket ship to fly above the storm. Charisse, as always, was managing the situation with calm expertise. She'd moved anything breakable out of Luna's path and was walking alongside her, not trying to stop the pacing, but ensuring she stayed safe. The lightning has colors inside it, Luna was saying, her words tumbling over each other. Purple and green and silver, but only if you know how to look. Miss Charisse, do you know how to look? I'm still learning, Charisse replied gently. Maybe you can teach me. Chandler watched from the end of the hallway, marveling at Charisse's endless patience. Other nannies had found Luna's manic episodes frightening or annoying. Charisse treated them like natural phenomena to be weathered rather than storms to be stopped. Around midnight, Luna finally collapsed onto her bed, exhausted. Charisse tucked her in with gentle movements, humming a soft lullaby until Luna's breathing deepened into sleep. When she emerged from Luna's room, Charisse found Chandler waiting in the hallway. You should be in bed, she said quietly. So should you. It's been a long day. They're all long days. But she said it without resentment, just acknowledgement. They walked downstairs together. The generators hummed, the only sound in the darkened house. In the kitchen, Charisse moved to make tea, a ritual that had become familiar to both of them during Luna's difficult nights. You don't have to stay up with me, she said, filling the kettle. Maybe I want to. She paused, her back still turned to him. Chandler. I know. This is complicated. You work for me. Luna needs stability. There are a dozen reasons why this is a terrible idea. He stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't name or resist. "Tell me I'm imagining the way you look at me sometimes." He took a wild gamble, hoping he's right. Charisse set down the kettle and turned to face him. In the dim light from the generator-powered fixtures, her face was all shadows and angles, beautiful and distant and achingly vulnerable. "You're not imagining it," she said quietly. "Then what are we doing?" "Trying not to make a mistake." "What if it's not a mistake?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see the war playing out in her expression. Professional responsibility warring with personal longing. Fear fighting hope. "What if it is?" she asked. Instead of answering, Chandler reached up and cupped her face in his hands. She didn't pull away, and he took that as permission to lean closer, until he could feel her breath against his lips. "Charisse," he whispered. "This changes everything," she said, but she didn't move away. Everything was already changing. When he kissed her, it was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But when she kissed him back, threading her fingers through his hair and pressing closer, it became something else entirely, desperate and hungry and full of 2 years' worth of suppressed longing. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together in the dim kitchen light. "This is insane," Charisse whispered. "Probably." Chandler's thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. "Do you want to stop?" Her answer was to kiss him again, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. This time it was a claiming, a surrender, a recognition of something that had been building between them since the first night she'd sat in his study and seen through all his carefully constructed walls. When they finally broke apart, Charisse rested her head against his chest, and Chandler could feel the rapid beat of her heart. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." "Luna has to come first." "Always," he agreed. "But that doesn't mean we have to pretend we don't matter too." Charisse pulled back to look at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded slowly. "We go slow," she said. "As slow as you need. And if it doesn't work, then we figure out how to stay in Luna's life anyway," Chandler finished. "Because you're right, she comes first. But Charisse, I need you to know something." "What?" "This isn't just about gratitude or convenience or Luna's needs. This is about you. About the way you make me feel like myself again for the first time since Rebecca died. About the way you see beauty in broken things and refuse to give up on people everyone else has written off." He paused, gathering courage. "I'm falling in love with you, and that has nothing to do with Luna and everything to do with who you are." Charisse's eyes filled with tears. "Chandler, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know." But she kissed him again, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they separated, she smiled, the first truly unguarded smile he'd seen from her. "We should probably go to bed," she said. "Separately," she added quickly, though her eyes sparkled with something that made Chandler's pulse quicken. "Probably." But he made no move to leave, and neither did she. They stood there in the kitchen, hands intertwined, neither wanting to break the spell of this first fragile step toward something new. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something beautiful was finally beginning to bloom. The next few weeks passed in a haze of careful steps and stolen moments. Chandler and Charisse maintained perfect professionalism during the day, but after Luna was asleep, they would find each other, sometimes on the back terrace, sometimes in his study, sometimes just in the kitchen, while one of them made late-night tea. They talked about everything and nothing. Charisse told him about her childhood in foster care, the families who'd tried to love her and the ones who'd simply endured her. Chandler shared stories about Rebecca, not just the perfect memories he'd polished until they'd lost their reality, but the real moments, the fights and frustrations and deep love that had defined their marriage. "Do you feel guilty?" Charisse asked one night as they sat curled together on the study's leather couch, her head resting on his shoulder. "About what?" "About this. About moving forward." Chandler was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "Sometimes, but not the way I expected to." "What do you mean?" "I thought I'd feel like I was betraying Rebecca's memory. Like loving someone else would diminish what we had." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But it doesn't feel like betrayal, it feels like continuation." "Continuation?" "Rebecca wanted me to be happy. She wanted Luna to have a mother who loved her unconditionally. If she could see us now— He shifted so he could look at Charisse directly. She'd probably be frustrated that it took me so long to realize what I had right in front of me. Charisse's eyes glistened. You think she'd approve? I think she'd love you almost as much as I do. The words hung in the air between them. It wasn't the first time Chandler had said he loved her, but it was the first time he'd said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, as if it was just another truth about their shared reality. Almost? Charisse teased, though her voice was thick with emotion. Well, she never had to watch you handle one of Luna's episodes. If she'd seen that, she definitely would have fallen head over heels. Charisse laughed, the sound warming something deep in Chandler's chest. I love you too, you know. I was hoping. Even when I'm difficult? Especially when you're difficult. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Though I have to say, your version of difficult is pretty manageable compared to Luna's. Give me time, I'm full of surprises. As if summoned by their conversation, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Charisse started to pull away, but Chandler held her close. She'll have to know eventually, he said quietly. Know what? Luna's voice came from the doorway, sleepy and curious. They turned to find her standing in the entrance to the study, clutching her stuffed elephant and looking impossibly small in her pink pajamas. What are you doing up, sweetheart? Charisse asked, automatically shifting into caregiver mode while trying to casually extract herself from Chandler's embrace. I had a dream about Mama, Luna said, padding into the room. She was in a garden with lots of flowers, and she was happy. Chandler's chest tightened. Luna rarely talked about her dreams of Rebecca, and when she did, they were usually nightmares about the accident. That sounds like a beautiful dream, Charisse said gently. Luna climbed onto the couch between them, settling herself with the ease of a child who'd never doubted her welcome. She said something funny. What did she say? Chandler asked. She said you were being silly about something and that I should help you figure it out. Luna looked back and forth between them with the sharp intelligence that sometimes made her seem far older than 7. Were you and Miss Charisse hugging? Chandler felt heat rise in his cheeks. We were. Are you in love? The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised him. Luna had never been one to dance around subjects, but it still caught him off guard. Yes, he said simply, because Luna deserved honesty. We are. Luna considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. Is Miss Charisse going to be my new mama? Charisse's breath caught audibly. Chandler could feel the tension radiating from her, the fear that Luna might reject the idea of anyone taking Rebecca's place. Nobody could replace your mama, Charisse said carefully. She was special and unique, and she'll always be your mama. I know that, Luna said with a touch of impatience. But people can have more than one mama, right? Like how some kids have a mom and a stepmom? Some people do, yes. Luna turned to look directly at Charisse. Would you want to be my second mama? Charisse's eyes filled with tears she couldn't quite blink away. Oh, sweetheart. I would be honored to be your second mama if that's what you want. I do want that, Luna said decisively. But I have some rules. Chandler bit back a smile. Of course she had rules. What kind of rules? Charisse asked. First, you have to promise not to leave, even when I have scary brain days. I promise. Second, you have to learn how to make chocolate chip pancakes shaped like animals. I can definitely learn that. Third, you have to marry Daddy so it's official. This time Chandler couldn't hide his smile, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Luna, that's between Miss Charisse and me. Actually, Charisse interrupted, her eyes sparkling with mischief and love, I think Luna makes an excellent point. We should definitely make it official, Luna beamed. Does that mean you're engaged? Chandler looked at Charisse, seeing his own amazement reflected in her face. They'd gone from stolen kisses to engaged in the space of a conversation, with a 7-year-old as their relationship counselor. I guess it does, he said. Can I be the flower girl? Wouldn't have it any other way, Charisse said, pulling Luna into a hug. As Chandler watched his daughter and the woman he loved planning a wedding in whispered, excited voices, he felt something he'd thought was lost forever, complete and uncomplicated joy. The next morning brought the inevitable awkwardness of having gotten engaged in the heat of an emotional moment, without any of the traditional romantic gestures. Chandler woke up wondering if Charisse regretted her impulsive agreement, if Luna's innocent enthusiasm had pushed them into something neither was quite ready for. His fears were put to rest when he found Charisse in the kitchen, humming while she made coffee and looking more radiant than he'd ever seen her. "Good morning, fiancé," she said with a grin that made his heart stutter. "Good morning. Any second thoughts?" "Only about whether Luna will insist on a princess theme or go for something more understated like fairy tale enchanted forest." Charisse handed him a mug of coffee. "What about you?" "My only second thought is that I proposed to you exactly backwards." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Chandler set down his coffee and dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen. Charisse's hands flew to her mouth, coffee nearly forgotten. "Charisse Howard," he began, his voice steady despite the way his pulse was racing. "6 months ago, you walked into my study and saw past every defense I'd built. You loved my daughter when everyone else saw only problems to be managed. You taught me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that love doesn't require perfection, and that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the spaces between what we planned and what life gives us." Tears were streaming down Charisse's face now, but she was smiling so wide it looked like it might hurt. "I don't have a ring yet," Chandler continued, "but I have a promise. I promise to love you not despite your intensity, but because of it. I promise to be your partner in raising Luna and any other children we might be blessed with. I promise to see you, really see you, every day for the rest of our lives." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "Will you marry me, officially this time?" "Yes," Charisse whispered. "Yes, yes, obviously yes." She pulled him up from the floor and kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude and hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes," Charisse admitted. "Good scared or bad scared?" "Good scared, the kind that means it matters." They were interrupted by the sound of applause from the doorway. Luna stood there in her school clothes, grinning broadly and clapping her hands. "That was much better than last night," she announced. "Very romantic. Mama would have approved." Chandler felt his throat tighten at the casual way Luna referred to Rebecca, but it wasn't painful the way it used to be. Instead, it felt like a blessing, as if his first wife was somehow present to witness and approve of this new chapter. "You think so?" he asked. "Definitely. She always said you were too serious about everything." This was good serious, though, wedding serious. Luna bounced on her toes with excitement. "Can we go ring shopping today? I know exactly what Miss Charisse should have." "You do?" Charisse asked, amused. "Something with sparkles, but not too many. And it should be strong, like Miss Charisse." Luna's expression grew thoughtful. "Maybe with a blue stone? Blue is for loyalty?" Charisse knelt down to Luna's level. "How did you get so wise about these things?" "I watch a lot of princess movies," Luna said matter-of-factly. "Plus, I've been thinking about this for weeks." "Weeks?" Chandler raised an eyebrow. "I could tell you loved each other ages ago. You both got that googly look whenever you thought the other one wasn't watching." Charisse and Chandler exchanged glances, both slightly embarrassed at being so transparent to a 7-year-old. "Well then," Chandler said, "I suppose we should trust your expert opinion on rings." 3 weeks later, just as they were settling into their new dynamic as an engaged family, the universe decided to test their foundation. It started with a phone call that came while Charisse was helping Luna with homework, and Chandler was in a video conference. The caller identified herself as Dr. Patricia Walsh from the Child Development Institute. Luna's previous pediatrician had referred their case for a comprehensive evaluation of Luna's treatment plan. "I'm sorry," Charisse said, her voice carefully controlled. "Luna is doing very well with her current care team. We haven't requested any additional evaluation." "Ms. Howard, I understand you're not Luna's biological parent or legal guardian. Is Mr. Ford available?" The dismissive tone made Charisse's jaw clench, but she kept her voice professional. "He's in a meeting. I can have him call you back." "That would be preferable. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding Luna's care." After Dr. Walsh hung up, Charisse stood frozen in the hallway, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Luna appeared at her elbow, having abandoned her math homework. "Miss Charisse, you look scared." "I'm not scared, sweetheart, just thinking about some grown-up stuff." But Luna's too perceptive eyes saw through the deflection. "Is someone trying to take me away?" The directness of the question hit Charisse like a physical blow. "No one is taking you anywhere. You're safe here with me and Daddy. Promise? I promise." But even as she said the words, Charisse felt the fragile security they'd built beginning to crack. When Chandler emerged from his office an hour later, she pulled him aside and explained the call. His reaction was swift and fierce. What concerns? Luna is thriving. She's sleeping through the night, her episodes have decreased by 70%, she's making friends at school. I know, but someone called them Chandler. Someone who knows enough about our situation to raise red flags. They didn't have to wait long to find out who. Dr. Walsh's return call that evening was coldly professional. Mr. Ford, we've received reports that Luna is being cared for by an unqualified individual who may be romantically involved with you. There are concerns about appropriate boundaries and potential conflicts of interest. Chandler's grip on the phone tightened. Ms. Howard is highly qualified and has been instrumental in Luna's recovery. Any romantic relationship between us is completely separate from her professional duties. Mr. Ford, Ms. Howard has no formal training in child psychology or behavioral disorders. The individual who contacted us provided documentation of several incidents where Luna was left unsupervised during manic episodes. That's completely false. Nevertheless, we're required to investigate. I'll be conducting a home visit next week to assess Luna's current environment and care. After the call ended, Chandler sank into his desk chair, running his hands through his hair in frustration and fear. Who would do this? Charisse asked quietly. I have a few ideas, Chandler said grimly. Rebecca's mother has never approved of my parenting choices. My ex-business partner, James Morton, has been looking for ways to discredit me since I chose philanthropy over profit maximization. He looked up at her. Or it could be any of the 18 nannies who quit and might feel defensive about their inability to help Luna. Charisse was quiet for a long moment, then, maybe I should step back, temporarily. Until this is resolved. Absolutely not. Chandler, be practical. If my presence is putting Luna at risk, your presence is the only reason Luna is stable enough to weather this kind of challenge. He stood and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. We face this together, or we don't face it at all. What if they decide I'm not qualified? What if they remove her from the home? The fear in Charisse's voice broke something in Chandler's chest. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against him. That's not going to happen. I won't let it happen. But even as he made the promise, Chandler felt the weight of how little control he actually had. Money and influence could solve many problems, but when it came to child welfare investigations, the system had its own logic and momentum. Dr. Walsh arrived the following Tuesday morning with a clipboard, a skeptical expression, and 2 assistants who immediately began photographing Luna's room and play areas. Luna, sensing the tension in the house, had been unusually quiet all morning. The interview process was grueling. Dr. Walsh questioned Luna extensively about her daily routines, her relationship with Charisse, and her understanding of the nature of the adult's relationship. Do Miss Charisse and your daddy ever fight? Dr. Walsh asked. Not really fighting, Luna said carefully. Sometimes they have serious talks about me when they think I'm not listening. What kind of serious talks? About how to help me when my brain gets scary. About whether I should try new medicine. About whether I'm ready for sleepovers. Luna's voice was small but clear. They always agree that they love me no matter what. And do they share a bedroom? Charisse tensed at the inappropriate nature of the question, but Luna answered with typical directness. No, Miss Charisse has her own room, but sometimes when I have bad dreams, I sleep with her instead of Daddy because she's better at the middle of the night hugs. When it was Charisse's turn to be interviewed, Dr. Walsh's questions were pointed and designed to highlight her lack of formal credentials. You have no degree in psychology, social work, or education? No. No certification in behavioral intervention or crisis management? No formal certification. Yet you've been solely responsible for managing a child with bipolar disorder? I've been part of a care team that includes Luna's psychiatrist, her pediatrician, and her father. My role is supportive, not diagnostic or medical. But you do intervene during manic episodes? I provide a safe, consistent presence. I don't attempt to medicate or restrain or diagnose. I simply stay with Luna until the episode passes. Dr. Walsh made notes with the air of someone documenting obvious inadequacies. The interview with Chandler was equally hostile. Mr. Ford, do you believe your romantic relationship with Ms. Howard affects her judgment regarding your daughter's needs? I believe our shared commitment to Luna's well-being is what brought us together in the first place. That doesn't answer my question. Chandler's jaw tightened. No, I don't believe our relationship compromises Luna's care. If anything, it strengthens our ability to provide her with consistent, loving support. And if Ms. Howard decided to leave, what impact would that have on Luna? The same impact any significant loss would have on a child who's already experienced trauma. Which is why we've made a commitment to Luna that goes beyond employment. After 3 hours of interviews and documentation, Dr. Walsh and her team packed up their materials with the same clinical detachment they'd brought to the process. We'll have our preliminary findings within 2 weeks, Dr. Walsh announced. In the meantime, I'm recommending that Luna continue with her current therapeutic team while we assess the appropriateness of the current care arrangement. After they left, the house felt violated and fragile. Luna retreated to her room, and Charisse found her sitting on her bed, drawing with violent strokes of black crayon. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" "Angry pictures," Luna said without looking up. "Of the mean lady who asks stupid questions." Charisse sat on the edge of the bed. Dr. Walsh wasn't trying to be mean. She was trying to make sure you're safe and happy. "I am safe and happy." Luna's crayon snapped from the force of her coloring. Why can't grown-ups tell when kids are okay? It was such a perceptive question that Charisse felt her throat tighten. Sometimes grown-ups get scared and make rules to try to keep kids safe, even when the kids are already safe. "Are you and Daddy scared?" "A little bit. But not scared enough to stop fighting for our family." Luna looked up at her with those two knowing eyes. "Is that what we are? A family?" "What do you think?" Luna considered this with her usual seriousness. "I think families are people who choose to stay together even when it's hard. So yes, we're definitely a family." That night, after Luna was finally asleep, Charisse and Chandler sat in his study, both too anxious to pretend normalcy. "What if they're right?" Charisse said suddenly. "What if I'm not qualified? What if my lack of formal training puts Luna at risk?" Chandler set down his book and turned to face her fully. "Do you remember Luna's first week with us? Before you came? You told me about it. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time in months. She was having episodes daily, sometimes multiple times a day. 3 different child psychologists had recommended residential treatment." His voice grew quieter. "I was starting to think they might be right. That I wasn't enough, that love wasn't enough. But since you've been here, Luna has had exactly 4 major episodes in 6 months. She's sleeping through the night. She's making friends at school. She's talking about the future like she believes she'll have one." Chandler reached for her hands. "Those aren't the results of formal training, Charisse. Those are the results of you seeing Luna for who she is and loving her accordingly. The system doesn't measure love. Then the system is flawed." Charisse leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his certainty even as her own doubts continued to swirl. "What if love isn't enough?" she whispered. "Then we'll find another way. But Charisse, I need you to hear me. You are not leaving Luna. You are not leaving me. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win because what we have is real and right and good for all of us." His fierce protectiveness wrapped around her like armor, and for the first time since Dr. Walsh's call, Charisse allowed herself to hope. The official review hearing was scheduled for a cold morning in November. Chandler had hired the best family attorney in the state, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hayes who specialized in custody and child welfare cases. "The key," Hayes explained as they prepared, "is to focus on outcomes, Luna's well-being, her progress, her own preferences. Dr. Walsh can question credentials all she wants, but she can't argue with results." The hearing room was smaller than Charisse had expected, more like a conference room than a courtroom. Dr. Walsh sat across from them with her report, looking grimly professional. The family court judge, the Honorable Maria Santos, reviewed the files with the kind of thorough attention that made Charisse's stomach clench with anxiety. Dr. Walsh presented her findings first. As expected, she focused heavily on Charisse's lack of formal training and the inappropriate blurring of professional boundaries created by the romantic relationship. "While Luna appears to be functioning adequately," Dr. Walsh concluded, "I have serious concerns about the long-term implications of her primary caregiver being an unqualified individual whose judgment may be compromised by personal involvement." Hayes stood to present their defense. She called Luna's psychiatrist first, who testified that Luna's progress had been remarkable and sustained since Charisse's arrival. "In my 15 years of practice," Dr. Martinez stated, "I've rarely seen such dramatic improvement in a child with early onset bipolar disorder." Ms. Howard may lack formal credentials, but her intuitive understanding of Luna's needs has been extraordinary. Luna's teacher testified next, describing the positive changes in Luna's social interactions and academic performance. Then Hayes called Chandler to the stand. Mr. Ford, in your opinion, what has been the most significant factor in Luna's improvement? Consistency, Chandler said without hesitation. For the first time since her mother's death, Luna has had someone who doesn't give up on her when things get difficult. Charisse has been present for every episode, every breakthrough, every ordinary day. That kind of reliability is what Luna needed to feel secure enough to heal. And your relationship with Ms. Howard, does it interfere with her care of Luna? Our relationship strengthens Luna's care. Charisse and I make decisions together, always with Luna's best interests as our primary concern. Our commitment to each other is built on our shared commitment to Luna's well-being. Finally, Hayes called Charisse to testify. She spoke about her approach to Luna's care, her methods for managing episodes, and her long-term goals for Luna's development. Ms. Howard, Judge Santos interjected, do you believe your lack of formal training puts Luna at any risk? Charisse took a deep breath. Your Honor, I believe that Luna was at risk when she was cycling through trained professionals who saw her as a case to be managed, rather than a child to be understood. My approach isn't about credentials. It's about seeing Luna as a complete person whose challenges are just one part of who she is. And what qualifies you to make that judgment? My own experience with being told I was too difficult, too intense, too much for the people who were supposed to care for me. I know what it feels like to be seen as a problem instead of a person. I will never let Luna feel that way. After closing arguments, Judge Santos called for a recess to review the evidence. The waiting was agony. Luna, who had been staying with Mrs. Patterson during the hearing, was scheduled to testify if the judge deemed it necessary. When court reconvened, Judge Santos addressed the room with careful gravity. This case presents an unusual situation where unconventional care has produced exceptional results. While I have concerns about the lack of formal oversight, I cannot ignore the clear evidence of Luna's dramatic improvement under Ms. Howard's care. Charisse's heart hammered against her ribs. However, the judge continued, I am also concerned about the potential for conflicts of interest given the romantic relationship between the primary caregiver and the child's father. Chandler reached for Charisse's hand under the table. Therefore, I'm ordering the following conditions. Luna will remain in her current living situation under the joint care of her father and Ms. Howard. However, Ms. Howard must complete formal training in pediatric behavioral management within 6 months, and the family must work with a licensed social worker who will provide monthly progress reports. Relief flooded through Charisse so powerfully she felt dizzy. They'd won, not completely, but enough. Furthermore, Judge Santos added, I want to commend all parties for their clear dedication to this child's well-being. It's evident that Luna is thriving, and that should remain our primary concern. As they left the courthouse, Charisse felt like she was walking on unsteady ground. They'd survived the challenge, but the conditions imposed felt like a constant reminder of how precarious their happiness really was. Hey, Chandler said, stopping her on the courthouse steps. We won. We won conditionally. We won, he repeated firmly. And now we move forward. When they got home, Luna was waiting in the front hall, still in her school uniform, looking smaller and more vulnerable than usual. Do I get to stay? She asked quietly. Charisse knelt down and pulled her into a fierce hug. You get to stay. We all get to stay. Forever? Forever and always, Chandler confirmed, joining their embrace. That night, as they tucked Luna into bed, she looked up at them with those serious dark eyes. I was scared you might have to go away, she admitted. But we didn't, Charisse said softly. And we're not going to. Even if I have more scary brain days? Even if you have scary brain days, Chandler confirmed. We're a family, Luna. Families stick together. Luna smiled. The first genuinely happy expression Charisse had seen from her all day. I love you both. We love you too, sweetheart. So much. As they left Luna's room, Charisse felt something shift inside her chest. The fear and uncertainty of the past weeks had been replaced by something stronger, a quiet certainty that what they'd built together was worth fighting for, and that they had the strength to weather whatever challenges lay ahead. The small chapel was decorated simply. White flowers, soft lighting, and enough seats for the 20 people they'd invited to witness their wedding. Luna stood at the altar in a purple dress she'd chosen herself, holding a basket of rose petals and grinning so widely it looked like her face might crack. Charisse walked down the aisle alone, having long ago made peace with the fact that she had no family to give her away. But as she moved toward Chandler, who looked devastatingly handsome in his dark suit, she realized she didn't need anyone to give her away. She was choosing to give herself to him, to Luna, to the family they'd created together. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, standing before their small gathering of friends and speaking truths they'd learned through trial and fire. "Charisse," Chandler said, his voice steady and warm, "you taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. You showed me that broken families can become beautiful families, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never saw coming." Charisse's voice was thick with emotion as she responded. "Chandler, you gave me something I'd stopped believing in, a place where I could be entirely myself and still be cherished. You and Luna taught me that family isn't about blood or circumstances. It's about choosing each other, again and again, especially when it's hard." When they exchanged rings, his a simple platinum band, hers the sapphire and diamond ring Luna had helped him choose, Luna bounced on, her toes with barely contained excitement. "Do I get to throw the flowers now?" she stage whispered. The officiant smiled. "Not quite yet, sweetheart." After they were pronounced husband and wife, and after Chandler kissed Charisse with enough passion to make their guests applaud, Luna finally got her moment. She threw rose petals with enthusiasm, covering the happy couple in a shower of pink and white. The reception was held in the estate's garden, strung with lights and filled with laughter. Luna appointed herself the official photographer, documenting every moment with a child-sized camera Chandler had given her for the occasion. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Charisse found herself standing at the edge of the garden, watching Luna chase fireflies with some of the other children who'd attended. Having second thoughts, Chandler appeared beside her, loosening his tie. "Only about whether I deserve this much happiness," Charisse admitted. "Well, I can settle that debate pretty quickly." He pulled her into his arms, swaying gently to the music still playing from the speakers. "You deserve this and more. You deserve every good thing life can offer. Even when I'm difficult?" "Especially when you're difficult." He spun her around, making her laugh. "Besides, I like difficult." "Easy is boring." Luna ran up to them, slightly out of breath but glowing with joy. "Daddy, Miss Charisse, Mama Charisse, can we dance too?" They pulled her into their circle, the three of them moving together under the stars. Luna chattered happily about the wedding, the cake, the flowers, and her plans for their honeymoon. As the night grew later and Luna's energy finally began to flag, they carried her inside and tucked her into bed. She was asleep before they'd finished the bedtime story, worn out by excitement and happiness. "She's going to sleep well tonight," Charisse observed, brushing Luna's hair away from her face. "So are we," Chandler said, pulling his wife, into his arms. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, they'd finally moved into the same room the week before the wedding. Charisse sat at the vanity removing her jewelry while Chandler watched from the bed. "You know," she said, catching his gaze in the mirror, "a year ago I thought I was just applying for a job. A year ago I thought I was just hiring help. And now I know I was hiring the love of my life." Charisse turned to face him, her heart full to bursting. "I love you, Chandler Ford." "I love you too, Charisse Ford." The name still felt new and wonderful on her tongue. After so many years of feeling like she didn't belong anywhere, she finally had a name that meant home. As they fell asleep in each other's arms, Charisse thought about the journey that had brought them here, the pain and loss that had nearly broken them both, the fragile trust that had grown into unshakable love, the little girl who'd needed them both to become the people she needed them to be. It hadn't been the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they'd chosen, and it was beautiful. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.